At the end of this video, you will know exactly what happens during the arena explosion. You will know what is arena explosion, what does it drop so much bolts and exactly how many, why do we have to shoot bombs to set it up, what is the invisible thing in the arena that we try to hit to set up the explosion, why do we have to kill these little guys every time, why the ball drop varies so much depending on the setup, why it is impossible to get 8k bolts explosions from the spawn. Arena Explosion is currently considered the best way in Ratchet & Clank to grind bolts and is consistently used in all checkmarks and 100% categories to grind the several 100,000 bolts necessary to finish the runs. The glitch happens with the arena fighting giant robots on Core 2. If you killed an enemy and used bombs during the fight and quit, then disabuse, an explosion will trigger, giving hundreds, sometimes thousands of bolts to the player. The players who run these categories know how to consistently make explosions worth around 8,000 to 9,000 bolts. So let's understand what exactly is going on. The objects that explode are the arena robots that still exist and still process damage, even when they are hidden because you are outside the arena. Their life cycle is bugged. Lethal damage triggers the explosion and ball drop, but being outside of Giant Clank mode prevents a normal cleanup and death, so they remain eligible to be hit and explode again. So how many balls is that? The giant robots got a 76 base bounty value. The game applies a 25% RNG margin, so that brings the number between 57 and 95. However, we usually grind in New Game Plus. With a 2x bonus, we will get between 114 and 190 for each explosion with an average of 152. But what exactly hit them? Actually, they consume hits from a hit storage table. This hit table is a small buffer that the game uses to store recent damage events, like who hit whom with what. We will look into this table right after, cause this is where the magic happens. But first, let's finish the bolt calculations. This hit table is 64 slots, meaning we can set up to 64 explosions on Death Abuse. So in theory, we could get 152 times 64 equals 9,700 bolts from this glitch. But in practice, we get only around 8k. Here is why. The first explosions will spawn bolts normally. Then, when too many bolts are spawned and not picked up, the game will cap the spawn bolts to 3 entities and calculate the closest to the value it can get to the total with only 3 units. So, if we got average to good RNG, it will spawn only 3 times 50 equal 150 bolts maximum. But we can still get bad RNG, so we will sometimes get between 110 to 150. After about 8 explosions, the game can't spawn bolts anymore, so it will credit them directly into your account. This mechanic is also what triggers the half-gen glitch that I found a few days ago. But even if it credited into your account, it's already been capped to 150. So overall, with average RNG, and if you set up correctly 64 explosions, you will get between 8,005 and 9,000 bolts. Now, let's get back to the hit table. We want to understand exactly how it's getting filled up and what hit the robots. Here's what the table looks like. You can see that it's getting filled up by any entity attack touching another entity. The bomb especially fills up the table nicely as it's a big AoE attack. Let's look closely as there are many things going on. Some hits are triggered by any attack from anyone that's not a bomb. They will not trigger explosions. I made them yellow. Some hits are triggered by the bomb and for some reason will work and create an arena explosion. I made them green. Some hits are triggered by the bomb but will not work. I made them red. In order to get the most bolts, we want to maximize the green cells, ideally having only green cells. Wait, what is happening? After you respawn, then every second 3 cells get written. That means there are 3 hits happening every second somewhere in the level. That completely stops you from filling all cells green and achieving an 8k explosion. Can you guess where the background hit spam is from? Let me show you. Because we respawn too far from the factory, the conveyor belt is not spawned in. So, the nuclear waste canisters spawn on top of each other and explode, hitting the other canisters. Each chain reaction generates a consistent number of damage events, which shows up at 3 new hit records per second in the table. That's why we can't farm from the spawn. We have to reach at least this area to spawn in the conveyor belt and give us a chance to fill the green slots. So how do we make green slots? Slots that will trigger an arena explosion on respawn. First, I noticed that actually hitting enemies with the bomb will make red slots that will not work. Hitting active robots don't work either because the slots get consumed immediately. Now, there is a misconception that you have to shoot a precise spot in the arena to register the hits that will create explosions. It's weird because the arena looks empty, but it's actually because the arena is empty that it works. It took me a long time to figure out. The green hits are actually from the bomb hitting your own Giant Clank hitbox. And you don't want it to register hits with any other mobby. So actually, shooting over the void is perfectly fine, as long as you don't hit the mountains. Now, an important precision. The way the hit table stores who's the victim of the hit is by storing the number of the memory cell in which the victim is written. It's called a pointer, and it will matter in a minute. Now is the last piece of the puzzle. Why does the hit that you made on yourself get redirected to a giant enemy robot, but only if you kill one of these small dogs before death abusing? It's especially annoying during the grind because they don't respawn when you death abuse, so when you run out you have to save and load your file again. Well, actually, the glitch triggers because they don't respawn. Killing a non-respawning enemy changes the allocation pattern during respawn. When you death abuse after killing a non-respawning enemy and the enemies are loaded in the level, the fact that this enemy is missing will offset every other enemy spawning in. So that means Giant Clank is created in another cell, and a giant robot is created in the cell where Giant Clank was. As soon as it's spawned in, the giant robot AI starts working, and the first thing it does is check for any hit targeting it in the hit table. It sees a hit from the bomb that one-shots it, so it triggers an explosion, but don't actually die, because how could a robot die if it's still hidden? Next frame, it checks the hit table again and sees another bomb. Repeat for every charged cell in the hit table. There are 2 more points that make this grind really efficient compared to most other areas in the game. One detail bugged me out because I researched the exact jackpot mechanics last week. In this level, during the grind, because the segment is completed, you are supposed to activate jackpot mode when you kill an enemy. Jackpot is good on a fresh file because it will give you up to 5 times more bolts from crates and enemies. This is abused in any percent categories. However, because the grind is done on a file that abused jackpot already, the multiplayer is terrible and all the bolts you spawn will be divided by 10. That's why we see the dogs spawn only 1 or 2 bolts during ACM bolt grind. However, the arena enemies are coded differently and don't count as being from a segment you've already beaten. They will give out your normal bounty every time. Another anti-farm mechanic is that most respawning enemies will give half their base bounty when you already killed them and respawned. But not the giant robots. They always give their full bounty. Thank you for watching. If anyone wants to make a proper video about this topic or make a deeper research, I'm very glad to help. So you can just contact me on Discord. Also, all of this research has been made on the NTSC PS2 version. I know PS3 has some differences, so it will be interesting to keep researching. Thank you, bye.